This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
The change management of implementing something new like this will take as long as actually building the system. That really helped me build a system that when it came to rollout, I had a lot of excited frontline fundraisers because they had been a part of creating something.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Lacy McAlister, Prospect Development Lead at International Justice Mission. Hello, Lacy. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we jump into how you recently upgraded to Prospect Development 2.0 at International Justice Mission in the U.S., and how you're rolling it out to Canada too, on top of all that, I'm wondering if you could stop for a minute and share with me a little bit about your career and how you actually started in prospect research and development.
Absolutely. So I went to school in Virginia, and I knew that I wanted to end up in the social impact space for my career, but I actually didn't know that fundraising and development is where I would land. I ended up with a job at a foundation working on an early literacy project, and I worked in development there and did grants management for that program, which I actually didn't know that I would be doing until my first day on the job. I learned that was what I would be handling, and I did a couple years there managing grants and working with corporate funders, which I really enjoyed. And I decided that I wanted to learn a little bit more about the individual and family foundation space when it comes to fundraising. So I transitioned over to International Justice Mission, where I am now. And I've been there for about 4 years, but I started on the major donor fundraising side. So I was on IJM's major donor team. I worked closely with our frontline fundraisers and helped a team of fundraisers on the East Coast. And so I did that for about 2.5 years before I transitioned over to the prospect development side at IJM, where I've been for about 1.5 years. So I really started in the frontline fundraising side, and then realized I love the strategy, the research, the development, all of the things that help make frontline fundraisers more effective and more organized and more streamlined. And so that's how I found my way over to the prospect development side, which is what I'm doing now.
That's amazing. I'm not sure I've talked to someone who has that kind of story where you start frontline and move to research. That's great. So
I went a little backwards.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure there's any particular direction these days. And it sounds like you really know what it feels like in the pit of your stomach kind of thing. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to talk to this person. I need to know these things.
Yeah, it's really provided great insight and context for how I've approached my current role. Has been really helpful, and it's also given me, I know our frontline fundraisers that I'm designing systems for and researching for, and that has just really helped a lot as I've tried to make changes at IJM.
So tell us a little bit about what Prospect Development 1.0 was like when you arrived on the scene, and then what's the story behind making changes to upgrade to 2.0?
So the 1.0 version was built over probably 5 to 7 years, and it really built prospect development from the ground up at IJM, and it served our team so well. There was so much of that really just, it helped grow our fundraising mechanism. It prepared the team well. It gave them a really strong foundation. And then when I started, my boss, who had built our initial prospect development program, told me, let's lay it all on the table. I want you to take a look at everything we have, figure out what's working, what isn't, what can we do better, and create a 2.0 system. And that was really because the first iteration that we had, while it served the team so well, it was built for a much smaller team. And over the years, our frontline fundraising team had more than doubled. We had switched systems. Now we are working in Salesforce. There'd just been a ton of transitions and leadership transitions. And we really wanted to take another look at our prospect development system and figure out how can we upgrade this to serve our current team well and also to build it for the future. So as our frontline fundraising team would grow, our system was built with that in mind.
That's quite a bit of work to do that kind of assessment and then reconfigure things.
It definitely was a process, and it really took about 9 months, I think, to go through the whole thing, from assessing what was working and what wasn't, to developing what we wanted to change, to getting that built into our system, to rolling it out to the team. So it kept me busy for a good 9 months of starting in my role.
And now that you're on the other side of that upgrade, do you have any advice for other people? And looking back, something you wish you knew before you started that process that you know now?
Yes, that is a great question. So something that I really figured out along the way that I wish I had known at the beginning is that the change management of implementing something new like this will take as long as actually building the system. So I spent about equal time developing and figuring out and deciding what our process needed to be, how we were going to code different prospects, how that would work in the system, making those changes with our CRM team. All of those pieces, I spent as long on those as I did on the change management side with our frontline fundraisers, because I really wanted this to be a system that was frontline fundraiser centric. I didn't want to build something that then our frontline teams didn't understand, or it didn't serve their needs, or they had a hard time using it. I really wanted it to be something that was built with their input and buy-in. And that meant a lot of change management, a lot of conversations, really opening my process up to a lot of input from over a dozen different frontline fundraisers, which at times felt like it could be slowing the process down. But what I had to keep reminding myself was that this is actually making what I'm building stronger, and I will benefit from all of the time spent gathering that input when I go to roll this out. But I had to figure that out along the way a little bit. And so my initial timeline of when I thought that I would be able to complete this definitely shifted throughout the process as I realized how much I needed to invest in the change management pieces.
It's all about the people. They're just not as clean and tidy and fast as putting code into a database.
Exactly. And figuring out how to marry those two things, the relationship skills and what we learn about our donors from our frontline fundraisers, and then marrying that with how we want everything to work in the system and be clean and crisp, which when you put those two together, it's never exactly a perfect fit. And so there's a lot of trying to streamline things and make us efficient and organized, but also recognize that this needs to work for our fundraisers who are on the ground. So we did a lot of conversations, a lot of tweaking, a lot of making sure that it made sense to the people using it.
You mentioned looking to the future as part of this process. Is that where your Canada office comes in, or are you just thinking in terms of growth of your office?
So it's definitely both. Our team in Canada is actually soon going to be walking through the process of adopting our prospect development system. And this is really what's 2.0 for our US team is essentially 1.0 for Canada. This is going to be new for them. And so we really wanted to create something that would work in both contexts. So we wanted to build a structure that was consistent across both of our offices so that I could centrally manage both our US and Canada prospect development systems, yet we knew it was going to have to be able to be implemented at different times. So our US team is operating, about 9 months ahead of our Canada team in terms of system implementation and process of how they manage their pipelines and their portfolios. So that's definitely been a challenge to figure out how to do that.
What about Canada just being completely different with, different privacy laws and access to data, different culture? Is that a challenge to your current system? Something that you thought about ahead of time or that you're encountering now? How are you managing that?
Absolutely. So it is something that we thought about ahead of time and tried our best, like I said, to build a structure that would be somewhat adaptable. But it is a challenge because we're applying something that we've already built versus rebuilding it from the ground up with the team. So there's also that change management challenge there too, because we want our fundraisers in Canada to have input and involvement while we're also realizing some decisions have already been made in terms of what's in our system and how we've coded certain things. And we have to figure out how to balance that and still ensure that we have a frontline centric end result for our Canada team as well, while recognizing that we don't want to create two different systems or different tags for our pipeline. We want to keep it all the same, yet we know it has to be adaptable to different contexts, like you mentioned. So it's definitely something that I see as a challenge and something that I'll be figuring out over the next couple months. But I'm hoping that the input and guidance from our US team will mostly translate to our Canadian team, and that we'll be able to make small tweaks as we need to fit the context in Canada.
Sounds like a really fun and challenging problem to solve. You have to keep
Yeah.
moving forward, even as maybe things have hiccups along the way.
Absolutely. We like to call that building the plane as we fly it at IJM.
It's so true. I like to say you're learning how to drive while you're driving. Same thing.
Exactly.
So what's the advantage? Why have everything centralized? What are you thinking there?
So one perk for our Canadian team is that a lot of this has already been tested. We've figured out where the bugs are. We've figured out where the hiccups are. We've been able to spend about 9 months moving things out that our US team figured out or realized or suggested. So we really are delivering to them a cleaner system and process than we were when we did this for the US team. So that is definitely one advantage. And then a second one, and part of what we learned throughout this process, was that there were certain functions or tasks that originally, when we had a much smaller frontline fundraising team, it made sense for those different pipeline management or portfolio or prospecting tasks to be sitting with our frontline fundraisers. But as our team has grown and their responsibilities have grown and our fundraising goals have grown, we decided to re-centralize some of those different tasks and aspects of just the whole prospect development system back with me and with our team. And so it allows me to keep some consistency across our region, both with the US and Canada, in terms of how we manage things, how we code things, how we're understanding them. And the hope there is we can provide our Canadian team more resources. We can equip them better. We can take some things off their plate by allowing me to manage them centrally. So that's another piece that we're hoping is a real advantage as we roll this out to our Canadian team.
That's really fascinating that you're watching this kind of fluctuation of tasks with your major gift officers, your development officers on the front line, because that is sort of a conundrum. As I've watched different people talk about it at different stages in their careers. What is a major gift officer supposed to do? Like, who's responsible for identifying a new prospect? Who's responsible for that first level research on that prospect? And people have some pretty strong opinions about who should be doing what.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it sounds like
Definitely.
you stood back from the opinions and you assessed almost as a group with you facilitating and came up with something that works at your organization.
That's right. And we really tried to look at where were their bottlenecks and what our process was. Where would the prospect get stuck, or where would our system break down in terms of how we were tracking the data that we had on our prospects and how they were moving through the qualification process. So we really tried to look at where were people getting stuck and how could we eliminate that problem. So for example, we discovered that we had way too many statuses for our prospects, and we were asking the frontline fundraisers to manage those, and they were getting lost. They couldn't keep up with, as a relationship was moving, which status did they need to change and how did it match up? And they were getting lost, and then we were losing the ability to track that movement. So we simplified our list of statuses dramatically, and we re-centralized some of that movement of our prospects back with our team in order to eliminate that bottleneck that we were seeing.
That's a great example. So before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have any last tips or resources to share about this.
Yes, I would say really don't be afraid to ask your frontline fundraisers what they want when it comes to prospect development. I think to me, at the beginning, that felt really intimidating. And I felt like that would knock my plans off track. And, how would I make something that worked for everyone? But I ended up just opening up my process and my calendar in some ways by saying, I'm an open door. Give me a call. I want to hear what you want. And that really helped me build a system that when it came to rollout, I had a lot of excited frontline fundraisers because they had been a part of creating something. And my fear in doing that was that I would have 15 different opinions and I wouldn't be able to make them all coalesce into one system and one structure. But actually the opposite ended up happening. And I was able to take a lot of opinions and suggestions and make them work together to create something that everyone was excited about. So don't be afraid to really lean into that bridge building role with your frontline fundraisers.
Very good advice. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Lacy McAlister, Prospect Development Lead at International Justice Mission. I hope you found her story as inspiring as I did. She took a big risk in opening up her process to the full development team and was rewarded with higher engagement and adoption of the new prospect development operations. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.